Hey everybody, welcome back to A Matter of Life and Maiden, the podcast of the Beast. I am Joe Labriola, and on today's episode 30 of the podcast. Man, that's crazy. Anyway, on today's episode, last episode 29, I did the best opening tracks on every Iron Maiden album, ranking them from the weakest to the strongest in my opinion. So today in episode 30, it's going to be the best album closers, the closing tracks on every Iron Maiden studio album, from the weakest to the strongest, in my opinion. And before I dive into this is July of 2024. I want to say that this is like the 6th anniversary of the podcast. I think Matt and I posted our first episode in July. It was July 2018, so July 1st, I believe. July 1st, 2018. So 6 years ago. I think we recorded it in mid to late June and posted it July 1st. So pretty cool, though, either way. And 6 years with this thing running. And episode 30 of A Matter of Life and Maiden, the podcast of the Beast. It's crazy to think it's been 6 years since we created this thing, but it has been. Anyway, jumping in. Coming in at number 17, in my opinion, the weakest album closer on any Iron Maiden album, and that's Mother Russia. Again, those of you who have been listening to the podcast, you'll know that No Prayer for the Dying is not my favorite Iron Maiden album. It's my least favorite Iron Maiden album. I think it's the weakest thing that they've ever churned out. I'm not saying that every song on there is horrible. There are a couple hidden gems on there, but for the most part, and you'll see what I'm talking about as we go on here, and if you listen to the podcast, or if you've listened to the podcast in the past, since the inception 6 years ago, you'll know that there are some songs that are super epic, and Matt and I have always been fans of the more progressive side of Iron Maiden. The long 10, 12, 13, 15, 18-minute tracks, right? That's what we love. The transitional pieces, the epics, so to speak. And Iron Maiden has done a thing. They did it in the 80s with Bruce. They did it since their reunion, where, the last 2 or 3 tracks, or at least the last track, has been this epic kind of like album closer that ties everything together and ends on a super high note. A super progressive note. Mother Russia is not like that. It's a very short song. The instrumentation's cool. The kind of like chanting at the beginning is neat. With the keyboard kind of like stuff, accents coming in is pretty cool. But the lyrics aren't that great. I don't think, the lack of solos in the album No Prayer for the Dying in general is something that's missing. I mean, it's not elevated to that level of musicianship that we come to expect from Iron Maiden. So with that being said, that's why Mother Russia for me, and I talked about this when I was ranking Steve's Epics 2, that 3-part podcast episode I did. There's just something lacking. It just doesn't convey the band in the way that I just mentioned previously. Like this song doesn't tie the album together. I mean, honestly, looking at it, you could have closed with No Prayer for the Dying. That song probably would have been a better way to close the album as opposed to Mother Russia. I don't think it does a good job of being the epic closer, and really, No Prayer for the Dying lacks true epic. There really isn't an epic song on it. There is no epic on it in that kind of sense of the word. They're kind of like shorter songs in the 4.5, 5-minute range. Maybe some a little bit longer than that, but there's nothing 7, 8, 9, 10-minute epics that we would come to expect from Iron Maiden. Even on, some of the following records, Fear the Dark later, there's longer songs. X Factor, there's longer songs. Virtual 11, there's longer songs. E.g., Sign of the Cross on X Factor, Klansman on Virtual 11. This just doesn't have it. So, for me, Mother Russia's number 17. Coming in at number 16 from the Killers album, Drifter. Now, when we talk about Killers, I do want to say that the song is a slight edge above Mother Russia. Killers in itself is a faster, very speedy album. The songs are designed to be shorter. There's nothing really long on it. The longest song on it, I think, is Prodigal Son. Most of these songs, very similarly to Mother Russia, are kind of short. They're like 3, 4, 5 minutes. But with that being said, I think the caliber of the songs, the songwriting, the instrumentation is just more solid, concise, precise in the Killers record. Drifter is an example of that. It's a really, short song. It's pretty good. But again, to encapsulate your entire album and put it on the shoulders of Drifter, to me, I don't know. I just don't think it should be the epic closer. You have the amazing Ides of March that goes into Murders of the Rue Morgue, that goes down the list of all these amazing songs. If you're going to close this thing out, you could have closed out with Murders in the Rue Morgue. You could have, or Wrathchild, sorry. Goes Ides of March into Wrathchild. You could have closed this out with Murders in the Rue Morgue. You could have closed this out with Killers. Something like that. Something that's a little bit more epic in feel and design. Drifter's just like this really straightforward closer. And that's kind of why, for me, it's near the bottom. It doesn't really tie the album together. And it in a way, same thing with Mother Russia. It just doesn't end on a high note. And you'll see what I'm talking about when I talk about these later albums. Like 10 or a dozen of these Iron Maiden albums end on a high note. And that's amazing. And that's why they're the stronger albums. Moving on from Drifter, because I don't want to spend too much time on it, number 15 is The Unbeliever from The X Factor. Again, you have the amazing opening with Sign of the Cross. You got Lord of the Flies on that record. You have Edge of Darkness on that record. You have Blood on the World's Hands. You have songs like that are kind of epic in design. And they close with The Unbeliever. It's just not a strong closer. It doesn't tie the album together. It would have been better if one of the more epic songs were set as the closer. It doesn't have a nice payoff, so to speak. You listen through this album all the way to the end, and the last song that you hear as the credits roll, so to speak, is The Unbeliever. It's just not a song that really hits home. It's not a song that is memorable. It kind of ends on a low note. It's a dud to end. So these last couple that we're going to go through here, and then I'll start telling you when these take a step up. But even the next one, I'm moving on from X Factor already because I don't want to spend too much time on these. Number 14 is Como Estés Amigos from Virtual 11. I think this one is a little bit better than the previous three I mentioned. There is kind of a really cool chorus. It's kind of like starting to get to a point where the musical synergy is a little bit better. It is a little bit more transitional as a piece. It does have a, no more tears, no more tears. Nice experimentation, more progressive sounding. So for that, it's a notch above. But again, it's not the flair. It's not the amazing solos. It's not the stuff that we know from Iron Maiden. Now, granted, and I'll say this, and Matt has said this before, we became Maiden fans in the early 2000s. So we had everything that they'd ever done all the way up to Dance of Death at that point. So, we could look back in hindsight and be like, man, there's this amazing catalog of music just sitting right in front of us. I know for some people who have been fans for 40 or 50 years, going on 50 years, that, they kind of had one release at a time over the years. Now, Matt and I kind of got everything all at once. One big package. It was like, here you go. Here's Iron Maiden, the record, all the way through Dance of Death. Enjoy. So we kind of went back and looked at it at having all that stuff already released to us. I know, and there's part of nostalgia that falls into that, etc., etc. So I just want to get that out of the way. So moving on from Como Estés Amigos, number 13 is Iron Maiden, the closer from the original record. Now, this song is awesome. Iron Maiden is super iconic. I think it's amazing. But again, it lacks a true guitar solo progressive sound. It's very short. It has an amazing instrumental section. The building and everything is really cool. And it's a staple in their live shows, and it should be. I agree with that. But in terms of a ranking standpoint, that's kind of one of the reasons why it falls here at number 13 too, just because of that nostalgia, like I mentioned. This is a important song. It's who they are. It's their title. It's their name. It puts them out there. It's their band. Iron Maiden. It's there at number 13 for that reason. Just because, yeah, it's not quite as progressive or epic, but it is a perennial staple in a live show. It is the song that is who they are. So it's more of a theme as opposed to an epic. It's almost like I would kind of describe it as if you're watching like the Batman 1960s TV series, right? It's like there's a theme song to that. The da na 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 na. It's kind of what Iron Maiden is. It's their theme. It's it's their theme song. So for that, it has a lot of power and it has a lot of meaning. But to say it's an expertly crafted musical composition like some of these other songs are, that's a bit of a reach. So that's kind of where it is for me. Moving on from that, number 12 from Seventh Son of a Seventh Son is Only the Good Die Young. I like Only the Good Die Young. I think it's a great song. But again, you have this amazing record that's super epic and super progressive. You have songs like Moonchild and Infinite Dreams and The Evil That Men Do and the title track, Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. And you close with Only the Good Die Young, a very short song. The cool thing about this song is at the end is when they go back into the 7 Deadly Sins, 7 Ways to Win, and it kind of ties the album together with Moonchild from the beginning. And it kind of ties it together. That's cool. I will say that. That was a cool way to kind of like try to tie things together. But in terms of like epicness and a grandiose, spectacle and appeal and even the musicianship and the sound, again, this kind of ends on like a very somber, kind of like weaker note as opposed to the rest of the record. So it would have been cooler if they closed with Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, or if they would have closed with something, just more grandiose, just bigger sounding. But I mean, this song is awesome. Like, I love Only the Good Die Young. I think it's a really cool song, but it's very short. It doesn't have that epic, that epicness of some of the other closers on the albums. Now, with that being said, that was number 12. Taking a step up now, number 11 is Fear of the Dark from the Fear of the Dark record. See, this is what I'm talking about. This is the title track to close out the album, and it really encapsulates the record. Now, Fear of the Dark, in my opinion, isn't that great of a record, but to have this in the closing position, it's the thing that you listen to last when you're listening to this record, and it kind of redeems the album, so to speak. It's like, hey, at least they close with something halfway decent. It has very catchy melodies, lots of transitions, the riff is awesome, it's epic, it really conveys the album cover. So, it's just that song, and this is like one of the first examples of it so far on this list, that is a true epic in every sense of the word that closes out the record in a good way. It's a song that sums up the album. It leaves you with something. Like the last thing you hear when you listen to this record as the credits roll, as I said, is the Fear of the Dark song. That's awesome because it is such an amazing song. It's very cool. I don't think it's the strongest closer they've had. I don't think it's one of the strongest songs they've ever done. But in terms of it being a closer and for the album, it does do a good job of conveying that and summing up the record, summing up the art, summing up the title. So for that, that's why it's in the number 11 slot. Number 10 after that is from The Final Frontier, When the Wild Wind Blows. As most of you know, and I say this on every podcast, every time I talk about this record, The Final Frontier, looking back on it, it's become probably my least favorite album since the reunion. But I do think it's a great album. I do think it's a great record. There are just some concerns I have with it, some issues with it that I have. Outside of those issues and concerns, though, When the Wild Wind Blows is a very cool song. It's very epic. There's a lot of really cool transitional pieces in it. It's a really well put together, orchestrated composition. And I don't think we really get to see that until we see Fear of the Dark, like I said previously. And then this is like another, example of a composition that encapsulates a record. And when you look at the Final Frontier record, I mean, I will say the ending songs on it in a row are all pretty damn good. I mean, you get Isle of Avalon, Starblind, The Talisman, The Man Who Would Be King, and then When the Wild Wind Blows. Epics. You get 5 epic tracks in a row, and that's cool. The problem with Final Frontier is the first 5 songs on the record are kind of unbalanced. They should have thrown another epic in there somewhere. But, it was kind of like, hey, middle range, short rockers. They tried to make the opening track an epic, but it just didn't work. Didn't work. It was just 2 different ideas that were too different. They weren't similar enough to make a good melding. So, in my opinion, some people love this record. My brother loves this album. It's one of his favorites, but like for me, it's not one of my favorites. I like it a lot, but it's not my favorite from the reunion. He likes this in Brave New World. And hey, everybody hears these songs differently and likes these songs differently and likes certain lyrics from some songs or certain lyrics from others, and it relates to them in a way, and it was the first song they heard or something like that. For me, I like When the Wild Wind Blows. I like When the Wind Blows. I like the short story, the graphic novel by Raymond Briggs. I like it a lot. But I own it. But this, again, is not one of their best closers or epics. I think it's one of Steve's, on the weaker side of epics. But with that being said, I do think it's a little bit of a step up from Fear of the Dark in terms of a composition standpoint. Maybe not for what the album cover conveys or what it talks about, because like I said, Final Frontier has 5 songs in a row that are epic. But for a closer and what it's about, and the fact that it's a longer song, it was, I think, the second longest song in Iron Maiden's catalog for the longest time, up there with Sign of the Cross and Rhyme the Ancient Mariner until Book of Souls came out. And then Senjutsu came out with their longer songs. So, cool song, very progressive, and epic in every sense of the word. After When the Wild Wind Blows, number 9 is from Brave New World, and that's The Thin Line Between Love and Hate. Now, I know that Brave New World, in essence, doesn't really have a quote-unquote epic per se. I think Blood Brothers would be the closest thing to that. The thing about Brave New World is the songs are very progressive. So they kind of fall in that category of like borderline epic. That's kind of where they're at. But I do think that the song The Thin Line Between Love and Hate really does sum up the Brave New World album as a whole. And again, the thing that's awesome about Brave New World is every song is good. Every song is solid. There's not a bad song on this record, in my opinion. You can listen to this from beginning to end without skipping a song and love every second of it. With that being said, it's almost like these songs, like I said, are proto-epic. They just never really hit that gear that drives them into the epic category. They come fractions away from it, in my opinion. This song is one of them. Dream of Mirrors is another song on here that's borderline epic. Out of the Silent Planet is another song on this record that's borderline epic. But they never really hit that gear that takes them to that next phase of epicness. But this whole thing with the transitions, Heart will die, my soul will fly, and I will live forever. That whole thing, that whole transition and all that is amazing. With the choruses and the riff and everything like that, it's just an awesome way to end the album. And I used to be obsessed with this song. I'd listen to it on my way back and forth. I'd park in a parking lot about 6 or 7 blocks away from university when I was an undergrad, and I would walk and have my headphones in, just Brave New World on repeat. And I used to put the song on repeat because I loved it so much. And it's just one of those songs, again, it's a nostalgia thing for me, too, where it's this high at this level because of my experience with it. So, that's where it is. Number 8, Journeyman from Dance of Death. I have really come to love Journeyman over the years, especially after seeing the Death on the Road performance of it live. Majestic, beautiful, unbelievable, an amazing closer to the Dance of Death record. The only full acoustic epic song I think they've ever done, and it is just unbelievable. I know they had an electric version of it, and you can find that online somewhere, but I'm glad they chose to put the all acoustic version on the record because I just think it's beautiful. It has that Renaissance-y feel, the minstrelly feel of Dance of Death. It sums everything up, and like I said, it ends the album on a high note. Like, even just the sentiment that it leaves. And the fact that it opened up with Wildest Dreams, like both of those songs in terms of like a tandem feel, a song to open the album and a song to close the album, both are talking about, doing what you love, what you want to do. Don't want anybody to tell you what to do. You have control of your own life, your own destiny, make your own decisions. Go out there and live your life to the fullest. Be happy, showcase your talents and your passions and disseminate what you love to people and be a good person. And it's about traveling and experiencing life. That's what it's about. Journeyman, like your life is a journey and living your wildest dreams. A tandem. I mean, it's just a really good song that encapsulates everything. Excuse me. And this record as a whole has grown on me a lot over the years. I really, really have come to appreciate Dance of Death. I really love No More Lies. Passchendaele is one of the coolest songs ever. And it's just amazing. Passchendaele is just phenomenal. Face in the Sand is really good. The title track is really good. Rainmaker's a really cool short rocker. I like Wildest Dreams. Montsegur is pretty cool. I mean, the record has a couple flat songs on it, 2 or 3, but I think for the most part, you got 8 or 9 songs on here that are damn good. So, and Journeyman does a good job of kind of wrapping everything together and leaving you satisfied when the album's over. And that's what I love about it. Moving on from Journeyman, number 7 is from the latest record, Hell on Earth. Now, Hell on Earth is a very, very cool song. When I listen to this, I hear elements of A Matter of Life and Death, Dance of Death, Book of Souls in it, even some of the older stuff like Number of the Beast, Peace of Mind. I mean, it has this really cool feel to it that I love. I love the Senjutsu record. It's one of my favorite albums. I mean, I know it's their latest one, but it's awesome. Like, I love the record. Now, the reason I say this is number 7 and it wasn't put higher on the list is because my favorite song on the album is The Parchment. And if I could do some subtle tweaking and change things up maybe a little bit, I probably would have put Hell on Earth above The Parchment and then closed The Parchment. That's just me. That's just me. That's the only really criticism I have with Senjutsu. I love Hell on Earth and The Parchment. They're both amazing. But that's what I would have done. I think The Parchment is just slightly more epic. But Hell on Earth is an amazing song. The whole Dance on the Graves Who Bled for Us. Do you think that they'll come for us? Like I said, a little bit of Seventh Son, because that phrase is in Senjutsu, the first song on the record. So it's almost like that Seventh Son thing where they're tying the album together again, which is really cool. The sentiment about it is awesome. It talks about war, and if you go through the album and just, conquerors and people killing and slaying each other and war and fighting and battles, that's kind of what the album is about. I mean, you go through every song, and, Senjutsu is loosely translated to tactics and strategy. So Senjutsu itself, the song, Tactics and Strategy, Stratego, it's about tactics and strategy, Stratego, strategy. Writing on the wall, the end of the world, that kind of thing. What are we doing with our lives? Then it goes into Lost in a Lost World, which is about Native Americans. We know what happened to them when the colonists came over here. The French and Indian War, all those different things. The Revolution, the Civil War, all that stuff. The Indian Wars, all those things in American history. Then you go Days of Future Past, right? Which is, same thing. Like, what do you do when you've conquered everything? Almost that motif, too. Like, do you want to live forever and be immortal? What do you do when you have nobody else around because everyone's gone? That kind of philosophy. What happens when you're by yourself and you've already achieved everything? You're kind of lonely. You feel lost. You're lonely. And then, obviously, Time Machine, going back in time. Can I change my ways? Can I alter things to correct my mistakes? Darkest Hour, Winston Churchill, his thoughts and philosophies of how he had to deal with World War II. And his decisions, again, war, Fast forward from that, and then you get Death of the Celts. Again, people coming and invading, the Romans killing the Celtic people, the battles, Britannia, all that stuff. And after that, you get The Parchment. It's about war and stuff again. Are we fighting over material objects? Are we fighting over these things that are supposed to make us reign supreme and, topple empires? And then Hell on Earth, like, hey, it's almost like a more modern critique on war and fighting and tactics and strategy and all that stuff. But we're giving, children guns now and all this stuff. So it really does a good job of tying the album together. And I know I kind of rambled on that for a while, but, when I do these podcast episodes, it's cool because I kind of like explore in my head the different motifs of these records. I don't think I've really ever said that about Senjutsu before. It really does have a theme. It has a lot to do with war and strategy and conquering and, the consequences of that and the guilt and what you have to face and the decisions you have to make. It's a really cool album. And that's why it kind of feels like A Matter of Life and Death. And it kind of feels like Book of Souls because it has a kind of cultural vibe to it with, feudal Japan, but also a more modern vibe to it with war and that kind of thing. Maybe not so much religion in this one, but like A Matter of Life and Death did, but definitely war and strategy and the consequences of it. And I think that's awesome. So, Hell on Earth at number 7 for that reason. Number 6, Empire of the Clouds from the Book of Souls record. Why is this at number 6? Well, first of all, because it's the longest song they've ever done at 18 minutes and 1 second. And it's just a beautiful way to close out the Book of Souls. The Book of Souls is an amazing album. If it wasn't for Tears of a Clown and Man of Sorrows, it would have been, damn near perfect. And if you cut Man of Sorrows off of it, it could have been perfect. One dud on the record. But this thing, much like I just said with Hell on Earth, really does a good job of kind of maybe not encapsulating the record as a whole, because this is the farthest thing from Mayan Civilization on the album, probably. But what it does do is it kind of gives you that Power Slave feel. This is like, people were comparing Book of Souls when it came out and when it was getting made, and when leaks and stuff came out, or, they announced it, and a couple months before the record was released, they were like, this is going to be like Power Slave 2. This is what the band members are calling Power Slave 2. And I saw a live show. I saw Somewhere Back in Time, which was a basically modern day Power Slave with the Egyptian stage set and everything. And I saw the Book of Souls live. And it was a very similar kind of vibe to Power Slave. It had the same feel. And Empire of the Clouds for me is that song that would kind of like, in a way, it closes out, just like some of the stuff on Power Slave that we'll talk about down the line. But it's like a literary work or a work that is tied to something that the band's passionate about. So while Power Slave was its main focus was ancient Egypt, they also had songs on there about, nuclear war, and songs on there about fighter pilots, and songs on there about dueling, and George and the Dragon, and The Prisoner, and Vietnam, and things like that. And Book of Souls is kind of like that album too, where they do have, Death or Glory is, you could compare that to Aces High. The Red and the Black and this song, Empire of the Clouds, are the two songs on this record that remind me of like Rhyme the Ancient Mariner from Power Slave. And then you have all those songs in between that kind of touch on other things. The Book of Souls is like the Power Slave of the album. The title track it's very similar to Power Slave in that regard. And with Empire of the Clouds, like I said, being said, you could have transposed this song with Red and the Black and closed with either one of them, and it would have been amazing. But I think the way they did it by putting Red and the Black in the number 4 position, so you get this amazing epic halfway through the record pretty much, and then closing out with this big, long 18-minute song is just perfect. And I think that's what I love about it. Not only is it a really cool epic closer, but the thing that's cool about this song is not only does it really showcase, like I said, kind of like a modern day version of Power Slave, but it also really hits home when you think about Bruce and his cancer struggle, and the fact that he was able to write this and give it to us as fans just shows you that he really gives a shit. It's like, look at this amazing composition that I created. Like, Steve's not the only one who can write awesome shit. And Book of Souls shows that with If Eternity Should Fail from Bruce at the beginning, and then a bookend with Empire of the Clouds from Bruce. So that's the reason why this is where it's at, and it's epic in every sense of the word. It's Bruce playing piano, the only song in the catalog where he's doing that in any Iron Maiden album, and it just really hits home Bruce, and that's why I love it so much. And it really showcases the band as a just amazing juggernaut unit that can perform together and do something completely different. This too comes out of left field. When this song came out and I listened to it the first time, I was like, wow, I was just blown away. Beautiful lyrics, beautiful musicianship. I think Red and the Black is a little bit of a better song, in my opinion, but I do think Empire of the Clouds is damn good. And it's a very amazing closer, and that's why it's at number 6. Coming in at number 5, after Empire of the Clouds, is Alexander the Great from Somewhere in Time. Again, amazing solos in the song. Historically amazing. Ties in to everything that the album kind of talks about. Kind of gives you a little hint back to Power Slave with Egypt, with Alexander the Great, and his story and his life, and ancient Greece, and how he conquered, Babylon, and went to Egypt, and all that stuff. It's just almost a little mini biopic in music for my favorite conqueror, probably my favorite historical figure of all time, is Alexander the Great. And I know it's nostalgia, and I'm probably biased for that reason, but I love it. I think it does a really good job of tying this album together. It's a great closer, and the same thing I mentioned with Empire of the Clouds. It's the farthest thing removed from Caught Somewhere in Time, right? The first song, or Somewhere in Time, the record. And every song on it really is about time to a certain extent. And this one is more about a historical figure, historical connotation. But the way it ties things together, how it sounds, the beauty of it weaved into the album and the placement of it is just perfect. So that's why it's at number 5 for me. Same thing I said about Empire of the Clouds. That's what Alexander the Great does. Same thing. So that's why it is where it is. I don't want to beat a dead horse with it because I pretty much said everything with Empire of the Clouds, but very similar to Empire of the Clouds and How on Earth for what they do for the album, how they tie things together, how they fuse it, the epicness of it, the strength of it. It's just a really strong song that sets the tone. Moving on from Alexander the Great at number 5, number 4 is To Tame a Land from Peace of Mind. First of all, this is like a song that does Dune justice, the book by Frank Herbert. I love science fiction. Everybody knows that I do. If you listen to the podcast, this song is just amazing on its own. Even if you remove it from this album, it's phenomenal. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I could see this song truly on like Brave New World. I think this song could fit on Brave New World. It's just one of those things that has that feel. That's why Brave New World and Peace of Mind are kind of like, similar in that way, that there's a song on there for everyone. There's something on those two albums for everybody. Because those two albums kind of like basically just go through all the band's favorite literary works, their favorite movies, their favorite artistic works, their favorite poems, etc., down the line. And they all kind of hit home, Brave New World and Peace of Mind. And I talked to Matt about this before. If you look at the reunion albums and you look at the albums in the 80s with Bruce, they're kind of like albums that are like you could pair them together. Like you could take Number of the Beast and pair it with Dance of Death, and it would make sense in that connotation. You could take Peace of Mind and pair it with Brave New World, and it would make sense. It's like Brave New World is a newer version of Peace of Mind. It's like Dance of Death is a newer version of Number of the Beast. You could take A Matter of Life and Death and compare it to Seventh Son. It's like A Matter of Life and Death is a newer version of Seventh Son in a way, because it talks about a theme, and it's very strict on war and religion, where Seventh Son stays in that mode. Book of Souls, like I just mentioned, is the newer version of Power Slave, etc., down the line. So that kind of thing, that comparison is there. Like Final Frontier is the newer version of Somewhere in Time, a futuristic Eddie, a futuristic, kind of theme. And then Senjutsu, obviously, is the album out, because there's 6 reunion albums, there's like 5 in the 80s with Bruce. But you take that album, you can kind of put that in line with the same thing I said about like A Matter of Life and Death and Power Slave. It's in that echelon. But To Tame a Land, I mean, that's kind of what the song is. I mean, it's just, Peace of Mind is an amazing record as a whole. And, it's one of those albums, listenability-wise, where you can just go all the way through, just like Brave New World. There isn't a bad song on this thing. And the difference is with Peace of Mind is I do think that this album has an epic. I do think that To Tame a Land is a true epic in every sense of the word. It does the book Dune justice. It sets a mark, right, for what would come later. It's an amazing song. The instrumentation's great. They have this really cool Middle Eastern vibe to it. It's unbelievable. And Peace of Mind is an album that has some of the most iconic Iron Maiden songs on it ever. And Matt and I talked about this in the podcast. It gets overshadowed by Power Slave. Same thing with Somewhere in Time after Power Slave. Like the album before and Peace of Mind, the album after and Somewhere in Time just gets overshadowed by Power Slave and the epicness of it. But there's no denying that Peace of Mind and Somewhere in Time, both themselves, aren't epic. But going back to Peace of Mind and To Tame a Land, like some of the most iconic Maiden songs on here. The Trooper, Where Eagles Dare. I mean, those two songs in general are just amazing. The 5-piece lineup with Nico now, like the actual band, the strength, the power to churn out stuff like this. And they take like the stuff they did on other stuff and improved it. And To Tame a Land is that example. It's just a song that transports you into a sci-fi world. It makes you feel like you are on Arrakis. It makes you feel like you are Paul Atreides. It makes you feel like you are living this out. And it has that kind of transcendence to it that Matt and I've talked about all the time in some of these songs. They literally can make you transcend if you're really into this kind of subject matter, because it's almost like you're watching the Dune movie. It's like you're reading the Dune novel. Same thing, like I said, with Alexander the Great and stuff. It describes it to you to a T, like verbatim. And that's why this song is so epic and awesome. And it ties the whole peace of mind notion together. Like, hey, this album is about things that we love. We love science fiction. We love Dune. We love dinosaurs. Quest for Fire, that movie. We love Sun and Steel. We love Japanese culture. We love World War II stuff. We love ancient Egypt, Revelations. We love all this stuff. I mean, it's all tied together in this record. And Entertainment Land is like the crown jewel of the album. It's the best. Moving on from Entertainment Land, number 3 is The Legacy from A Matter of Life and Death. Wow. I don't even know what to say about this album. This album, A Matter of Life and Death, is amazing. Like I said, and I've kind of talked about it in bits and pieces throughout these last couple songs that I've talked about, The Legacy is one of those songs that ends on a high note and ends the album on a high note. It encapsulates everything that the album kind of sprinkled and fed you throughout while you were listening. Hey, this album is thematic about war and religion. And then when you get to the end, it's like, yeah, when you go to war and you make decisions, and it's, not only does it apply, it's also philosophical. Not only does it apply to war and religion and your belief system, but it also applies to, how you carry yourself in the world. What kind of legacy are you going to leave in your life based on the decisions you make? Are you going to be remembered as a good person? Are you remembered as a bad person? What kind of person are you going to be remembered as? And that's kind of like, are you going to die happy? Are you going to die with regrets? Like that whole thing. Everything about The Legacy does that. It ties every song together. All the little stuff, like I said, the little breadcrumbs that are fed to you throughout the album. When you digest them and you finally get to the end, you're like, holy shit, this thing has come full circle. I understand what it's about. I understand the meaning. Some of the lyrics in here, I talk about this in, the best lyrical songs, and The Legacy, I think, was number 1 for me. It's just, the lyrics in this song are unbelievable. They define life and what you're going to do. And I think it's one of the best lyrical songs Iron Maiden's ever done, if not the best of all time. It's the transitions from the soft acoustic chords to the beginning, through all the different melodies and the guitar riffs and the tones. This is why I love A Matter of Life and Death, the record. That's why this podcast is named after that record. Because Matt and I love that so much. And The Legacy is one of those songs that we wore the crap out of. We listened to the song hundreds of times. I listened to it in my lifetime hundreds of times. This is cream of the crop, closing epic Iron Maiden. Listen to this song. It is amazing, and that's why it's at number 3. Moving on from The Legacy, number 2 from The Number of the Beast, Hallowed Be Thy Name. Wow. Again, listen to the Hallowed Be Thy Name episode, the Number of the Beast episode, where we talk about Hallowed Be Thy Name, and you'll see why we love this so much. Again, like I mentioned with some of these songs, like Alexander the Great or Entertainment Land, it really puts you in a place where you feel like you're this person awaiting to be executed in a cell. It makes you feel like you're that person. The way Bruce sings it, the way the lyrics are designed and written and constructed, the musicianship, the instrumentation, the gloominess of it, it really puts you there and transports you to that jail cell like you're getting ready to be hung in the gallows pole. It does a great job of conveying the record. And Number of the Beast is one of the greatest records of all time. I mean, in rock and metal music history, in my opinion. And I love The Number of the Beast. And Hallowed Be Thy Name is where it's at for me just because of that. The riffs, the hauntingness of it, the catchiness of it, the sheer just... When you hear Bruce come out and sing this every time, it never gets old. I've heard this song many, many times. It never gets old live. It's amazing. They should always play it. It's an amazing song. Encapsulates one of the greatest heavy metal albums of all time. And much like I said with The Legacy, it wraps everything together on that record. About the occult, not knowing, mysticism. What is this about? All that stuff. It's just an amazing job of doing the same thing that some of these songs, like I mentioned down the line here, have done. Really everything from The Thin Line Between Love and Hate down, from number 9 down to where we're at now, to Hallowed Be Thy Name, have done that. And that's why they're all amazing, and that's why they're in the top, top 9. And, throw When the Wild Wind Blows in there too, top 10. I think it's pretty awesome. they have that ability. But Hallowed Be Thy Name is just an epic song in every sense of the word. It is like probably the first epic closer they ever had on any Iron Maiden album. It was the first time they were like, hey, let's throw this amazing closer at the end of the record to close it out and leave a lasting impression on this album. And this is what I'm talking about. This is like the beginning of the formula where they're like, okay, for the next couple of records, let's just churn out like one or two epic songs at the end so people get hooked and they're left with this amazing lasting impression. And then when the reunion rolls around, that's what they've done every time. So obviously they've stuck to that for many, many years now. And I think it works like a charm. Moving on then from Hallowed Be Thy Name, the last song, number one, my favorite Iron Maiden song of all time, Rime of the Ancient Mariner. This again for me is a nostalgia thing, but it's also the fact everything I echoed with Book of Souls ties the album together. It's a literary work. It's the most progressive thing, in my opinion, I think they've ever done for the time. It's just outstanding. I never get sick of watching this. It's a nostalgia thing for me because in my head, when I hear this song, even the album version, I just picture the Live After Death video footage and then my experience seeing Somewhere Back in Time in East Rutherford, New Jersey. The song that they recorded and put on the live DVD was the show that I was at, that Matt was at, that we were at. This is immortalized for me forever. It's number one for me. It always will be number one. This thing is the cream of the crop. It takes the cake every time for epic closer. No matter what album they come out with down the line, it's going to be very, very hard to top Rime of the Ancient Mariner for me. I don't know what they're going to do. I mean, they've come close. I mean, some of these later records, as you can see, the last two records, number 7 on this list and number 6 respectively on this list. You know, 2021's Senjutsu, the Hell on Earth song, number 7, and 2015's Book of Souls, Empire of the Clouds, at number 6, pretty high up on my ranking. They've come very, very close to touching that magic from Rime of the Ancient Mariner again, as far as I'm concerned. And even Legacy at number 3 on this list, I mean, just very, very close to retaining and revisiting and grasping those straws again, clutching that amazing epicness, and they've done a hell of a job. This is why they're my favorite band, because they know what they do good and they know what they do well, and when they come out with new records, like I said, since the reunion, they've just improved and improved and improved every time. Every single time. And they experiment and they try different things because they want us to be happy as their fans. And I think they do an amazing job. And that's why Rime of the Ancient Mariner for me is number one. It always will be. When they all line up together, Steve, Davey, and Adrian, and the original Live After Death, and then Yannick thrown in with the newer stuff now when they play it live on Somewhere Back in Time, it's just unbelievable. Blows my mind. Never gets old. I shed a tear to this day every time I watch this song live. Even sometimes when I think about it in my head and I'm hearing it or I'm listening to it. This song is just so nostalgic to me. It's so meaningful to me. This song made me a metalhead. This song made me appreciate Iron Maiden. This was the song. This was the show. This, to this day, Power Slave and A Matter of Life and Death. Those were the two albums that I was infatuated with and obsessed with in the early 2000s when I was really becoming a Maiden fan and diving into all this stuff and getting into guitar music and heavy metal and rock and roll and learning how to play guitar and play riffs and melodies and, you know, getting the Jackson Warrior guitar and then later getting some Ibanez's down the line and then, you know, later on getting Fender Strats and gravitating back towards Gibsons and getting, you know, things like that and Epiphones and all these different guitars because, you know, my heroes played them. And to this day, you know, Adrian, Dave, and Yan are my guitar heroes. I mean, there's plenty more too. You know, I love Eddie Van Halen. I love the instrumental guys, Joe Satch, Steve Vai, John Petrucci. I love those guys too. I love Richie Blackmore. I love Tony Iommi. You know, big fan of Zach Wild. I think he's awesome. I love all those players. Randy Rhoads. I love Steve Morse. I mean, those guys, and the list goes on. Steve Howe, Michael Ackerfeld, Alex Lifeson, Michael Romeo, Matt Hafey, like all these guys, Robert Fripp, the list goes on. But the reason I love those guys is because of songs like Rime of the Ancient Mariner, albums like Power Slave, albums like A Matter of Life and Death. It was cool because when Matt and I really got into Maiden and became super big fans, like I said, we had that whole back catalog of stuff to go through. And fortunately for us, we got to digest that for, 2 years, 2.5 years, until A Matter of Life and Death came out. And when that album came out, I mean, it knocked us on our asses because it was so good. It was so much better than what we thought. It set the bar, and for the longest time, it was like the be all end all. Like nothing could touch it. Nothing could touch it. And I honestly think even after Final Frontier came out, I think it was a little bit of a step down from Matter of Life and Death. But then when Book of Souls came out and Senjutsu came out, there was so much stuff on there that was new and fresh and exciting that it took Matt and I back to reliving our glory days as Maiden fans from, like I said, the early 2000s when we got to digest all the stuff up to Dance of Death from the inception of the band, and then A Matter of Life and Death came out and we were just like blown away. And since then, we have been huge fans for 20 years now. 20 years now we've been Iron Maiden fans. It's hard to believe that, but that's where we're at. That's my ranking and that's my list. Thanks again, everybody, for listening to A Matter of Life and Maiden, the podcast of the Beast. I am Joe Labriola. Go out there and see Iron Maiden on the Future Past Tour. I'm going to be seeing them in Pittsburgh, November 8th of this year, PPG Paints Arena, November 8th, 2024. We got some really good seats. I'm super excited. I hope the set list is the same. Everybody take care of yourselves out there. Long live Eddie and the boys. Up the irons. Remember, Maiden is life. The rest is history. See you guys next time.